If you have ever felt exhausted, resentful, or even quietly overwhelmed by all of the invisible labor in your home, this episode will give language to what you have been carrying. Bonjour and welcome to Blumera Podcast. I'm your host, Brienne, and today I'm sitting down with Laura Danger, a licensed educator and author of Mediocre No More, a call to reimagine our relationships and demand more. We talk about the invisible dynamics that are shaping modern relationships, especially inside of our homes. We break down weaponized incompetence, what it is, how it shows up in everyday partnerships, and how to tell the difference between genuine lack of knowledge and avoidance disguised as helplessness. We talk about the emotional toll of constantly picking up the slack, the burnout that comes from carrying the mental load, and the way emotional and domestic labor often falls disproportionately on women and marginalized partners. If you have been following me since my episodes on the chore wars and finding equity within your home, you are absolutely going to love this episode. And I guess the reverse is true. If you love this episode, you should go check out my other episodes on the chore wars and finding equity within your homes. I will have those linked in the episode description for you, along with Laura Danger's book. Okay, but enough of that. Let's get right into the interview. The first question I have is, what is weaponized incompetence and how does it show up in everyday relationships, especially in the home?
Great question. Okay, well, I hear a couple of takes, so I'm going to give you my take on this. Weaponized incompetence is doing a bad job at something on purpose, and oftentimes it's with the intent of avoiding the task or getting someone else to do the task. And it can look a lot of different ways. So where people seem to disagree about what weaponized incompetence is if it is an intentional harm that is being done or not. So it gets murky when it comes to the intent behind the behavior. I believe that weaponized incompetence is actually emotional labor being weaponized, because if somebody is doing an insufficient job at a task that they've taken responsibility for, the solution, right, is to try a different way or to assess the situation and problem solve, or get on the same team and be like, okay, these are the resources we're working with. I've been trying it this way and I can't seem to accomplish this. So let's put some energy into finding a way to get to the sufficient completion of this task. But weaponized incompetence often shows up when bringing up the issue becomes stressful, when bringing up the issue creates a fight, when there is defensiveness, avoidance, downplaying, dismissal. And so the person who is asking for help, say around the house, starts to avoid bringing it up. And so if there's a couple or there's a household where one person is mostly in charge of handling things and they're soliciting support or soliciting help, they're already having to do the emotional labor of speaking patiently, even when they're overwhelmed. They're using a measured tone. They're thinking, okay, but what is this person skilled at? How can they insert their help? So they're doing all of this thinking up front. And when they're met with defensiveness, it wears on them emotionally. If they choose not to ask for help anymore, it damages their energy and access to their own autonomous time. So it's like a deflection tool for the person who pretends they don't know how to do something or does a bad job and erodes the trust or makes it so it's not ideal to ask them for help anymore. And that might not be an intentional harm that the avoidant person is doing. They're not like, oh, I'm really going to stick it to my partner. Like, oh, they're going to pay for this. But they are causing harm, and they are doing it very likely knowing that they are causing harm. The person who is asking for help is probably very frustrated or has expressed their disappointment. So if you are harming someone and they say your behavior is harming me and you don't do anything about it, then you're willfully participating in that harm. And that's a weapon.
That is, I agree. How do we begin to unlearn or call out this behavior in a way that leads to change, not shut down or that defensiveness you were talking about?
This one's tricky. I think that at the core of weaponized incompetence is this skirting of accountability and skirting of responsibility for your own behavior, or not recognizing or not being empathetic to the impact you have on other people. And that's more than just something that happens within like romantic partnerships. So very likely someone who is using weaponized incompetence, I know this is kind of a strong term to use, but I believe it's an entitlement. They are behaving as if they are entitled to accommodations without acknowledging it. And everyone deserves accommodations. Everyone deserves to be treated with consideration and empathy. But there's like a power imbalance when one person is not taking their own responsibility. You can't fix that for someone if they're unwilling to fix it. So if you are in this dynamic, and it doesn't matter if it's your romantic partner, or if it's a friendship or a parent or a colleague, all you can do is work on your own communication and be direct and come up with clear expectations. Something I've seen people do is acknowledge out loud the impact that something is having, and basically doing like a think aloud always, saying like, I'm deciding not to ask for help here because I feel like this is going to get done if I do it. Like just being very transparent and open, getting their own therapy or support, whatever your methods are for getting the support you need for yourself. But always remembering you can't force someone to accept responsibility for their behavior. You can only do that for yourself.
That's great advice. I also love a good think aloud.
Yeah.
Can you explain the Nag Paradox and why women or marginalized partners often get labeled as nags when they advocate for equity?
I love that question. The Nag Paradox is real close, like real close friends with weaponized incompetence, because the Nag Paradox is this pattern where, and it comes from the to-do list style division of labor that so many of us have been taught is equal or balanced. So when one party is held responsible for managing, delegating, deciding, figuring out how things should be done, they have a massive amount of information to be holding on to and paying attention to. And again, there's a ton of emotional labor, not just in asking for help, but managing their own overwhelm and also feeling responsible for not letting anything fall through the cracks. Because if you're responsible for a million things and you are delegating a dozen, you've got a million opportunities to mess things up. And when you're asking for help, you're also held responsible when the other party messes something up. You didn't give them enough info. You weren't clear enough. You were rude when you asked. So what that does, the Nag Paradox creates a sense of criticism and dismissiveness or defensiveness. So if one party is frequently telling the other party what to do, when to do it, and correcting them, it comes off like criticism, especially if they're feeling stressed. And then the other party is probably feeling defensive because they feel nitpicked, managed, told that they're not doing enough, told they're doing things wrong. And there's a little bit of validity to both of those things. However, if we could snap out of it and again, take personal responsibility and some initiative and creativity in how we problem solve, we can each help break ourselves out of that loop because everyone's damaged in it and the damage is not doled out equally.
What does invisible labor look like in modern relationships and households? And why is it so often ignored or undervalued?
Well, I don't know about you, but when I became an adult, there were so many aspects of life that I didn't even notice existed. And I know in my life right now, I just keep repeating to myself, if it's not one thing, it's another. And it's like things are breaking. I didn't realize there was maintenance that needed to happen. I didn't know certain materials in my old home would degrade over time. There's so many things to keep track of all the time. And each of those thoughts and decisions takes brain matter. It takes energy and effort and thought. And we only have so much time and energy and effort to give on any given day. And in a capitalist society where productivity is king and money is what we measure value with, or wealth and power, I guess, care work and domestic work and kin keeping and all of the things that actually keep us alive and maintain our lives and our relationships and our households and nurture us, all of those things they're rendered invisible. They are the things that we don't pay attention to, or we're taught we shouldn't pay attention to because it's just not important. It's a means to an end, and the end being getting to work, getting the raise, getting the house, and being better, more powerful, more productive.
How can couples or co-parents begin identifying those invisible tasks that one person might be silently carrying?
Oh boy. I think personally, I had a wake up call years ago when Eve Rodsky, I read her book, Fair Play, when it came out in 2019. And in it, she does a very, very good job of not only listing out a lot of the tasks that we might not be able to like list off for ourselves off the top of our heads, but she also points out the planning and anticipation and the other elements that often go unnoticed. And it's like a third of the book. And I remember hearing it on audio, and it just felt like she was reading for like an hour and a half, all of the little things that we do every day. And so Eve Rodsky does a fantastic job and has this system called the Fair Play method. And there are so many other systems out there, lists out there. And I mentioned the think aloud. Another thing that has worked really well in my household is to do a task and observe the other party doing the task that, like if my husband has something he manages all the time that I've never really paid attention to because he's always doing it, observing myself, watching him, asking him questions, being curious, and giving him the space to kind of talk through it as if he's turning his internal monologue to an external one. And then I'll do the same for him. That is very helpful for understanding each other and kind of getting on the same page about what is going on in our households. But I fully believe that the things to keep in mind are always just curiosity and trying to get clear. That's there. You're never going to like have the complete list of everything that it takes. It's a mindset shift of thinking, what are the things that sustain me? What are the things that make me feel cared for? Or what do I love when I sit down at the end of the night and I'm like, do I like a book? Do I like the way my blanket smells? Do I feel things are complete and tidy? Do I get to rest? What has facilitated that feeling? And it really is just curiosity.
That's a great tip. And I'm so happy that you brought up Eve Rodsky too. That was a game changer in my house and doing a chore audit. I have a whole nother episode on just that because like you said in that book, there's so much that goes into it, and breaking down each individual task into steps. Even the planning phase, the like laundry isn't just one task. You're sorting it, you're putting it in, you're transferring it to the dryer, you're taking it out, you're bringing it to the room, you're sorting that and putting it away. Like it makes sense that you need to break it down like that, and that completely changed things for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
She's fantastic.
Yes. I am so happy. I was hoping you would. I gave you a chance. What's the connection between emotional labor, mental load, and the breakdown of fairness in partnerships?
That's a good question. Rose Hackman describes emotional labor as the self-editing work you do on yourself, regardless of how you are feeling, in order to create an emotional reaction from someone else. So it's even when you're overwhelmed, giving a smile. It's being cautious about your words. It is considering someone else's emotions in what you are doing and then tailoring what you are doing to them. So when that's done with reciprocity, when you are both doing it for each other, that's just treating each other with consideration and care and empathy. And so emotional labor is like a healthy, wonderful thing, the undercurrent of all of our connections. And when it's imbalanced, that's where you get this inequity, and it becomes a minefield to bring things up because maybe in air quotes, the nag, the person who's managing more, is frustrated, overwhelmed, overburdened, has less capacity to offload patiently. They end up then being blamed for when the conversation devolves. They take blame for not asking for help sooner. They take blame for when they blow up. And the person who has not been doing that work, has not been taking initiative, has not been paying attention, being curious, looking around to see what needs to be done, jumping in, being empathetic to their partner's overwhelm, they get off scot-free because they weren't being held responsible for that. So I would say that the invisible labor is the emotional aspect and also the mental management or the domestic engineering of I have to do this in order to do this. My fridge is running low on the certain fruits my kids like, but there's a half a container of one from before. So when am I going to decide when to go shopping so we don't waste the food that's there before I replenish? Like all of these little details, and even remembering my kid is low on iron. So I'm going to have to figure out how to hide like a leafy green in there, because the last time I tried that, it went poorly. Those are the mental pieces of managing a household, and thinking through all of it is a ton of work. And especially when you're responsible for the care of other people, there can be this sense that if you drop the ball, you're going to like damage other people for the rest of their lives, or you're going to set them up to have a weird relationship with food. It's a ton of pressure. So yeah, that's my take on invisible work.
It's a great take. Very thorough. What's the difference between equality and equity in a relationship, and why is that distinction so important?
I love the idea of trying to figure out the difference between equality and equity. And I think it comes down to, again, a worldview shift where when you approach a relationship as transactional, then I'll do this and you do that. My 30 minutes, I will trade you for your 30 minutes. And that sort of transaction or trade or tit for tat approach in anything, especially like the most human work we do, doesn't account for our humanness. And so something that's going to be really challenging for me, maybe it's, I don't know, lifting something heavy, as simple as lifting something heavy. It might be so easy for my husband. However, his work schedule is going to make it really hard for him to be available to pick the kids up if they get a phone call that they're sick. It's going to be no sweat for me to do that. So when you think about equity, you're thinking about who we are as people, what skills and challenges we each have, how we relate to each other, and also that our capacity ebbs and flows. So again, like you're never going to figure it out. There's never going to be a like, oh, we found the formula. This is how we divide our tasks. Because even then, like I love mowing the lawn, and it's one of my favorite things to do. I adore it. I love being outside in my garden. And sometimes I don't want to do that. Sometimes I want my yard taken care of. And I would actually much rather like dig through a box of old paperwork because it's been on the back of my mind stressing me out. And finding equity and a positive or healthy or connected way of dealing with equity is focusing on how can we go with the flow? How can we attune? How can we manage challenges in the moment? And how can we always try to tackle something, supporting each other and thinking about each other as whole, complicated people, and maybe not limiting our expectations of each other to just our little nuclear units. We weren't meant to just have everything figured out and solved within tiny little silos. So it takes some creativity.
It does. And like you said, if it's not one thing, it's another. Like with the house, there's always going to be something new that comes up. So you can't just have it all laid out perfectly. And I appreciate that you give yourself space to change even in what you want or need in that moment. I think that's really important, especially with chore audits or like division of tasks. You can get so set in those that you don't have the flexibility of changing and revisiting it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that you brought up mowing the lawn. I love mowing the lawn too. I know.
It's the best.
It is. It absolutely is. How do we begin to rewrite the expectations around who does what, especially in a heteronormative or patriarchal household dynamics, or just the society in general?
Great question. I wish I could just explode it all the way. I think an interesting thing to look at is like there are studies, not enough, but there are studies of generally who does what. And yeah, a lot of times, like I think a recent study showed that of all of the household tasks, the one that most men did from start to finish was trash. Taking the trash out. But even then, do we know if it accounts for like the quarterly bleach that you have to do of the bin, or like who calls the city when a rat chews a hole through the alley one? There's those pieces too that who knows if they're accounting for that. But when you look at the trends, there are like traditionally gendered tasks, and there have been some changes in the last couple of decades when it comes to like care work and how much time men are spending tending to the house and tending to their families. But even in queer partnerships, and a lot of times outside expectations end up influencing how chores and things are divided. Sometimes if someone is how someone feels about gender or their gender expression will influence what tasks they take on. Now, when you consider the big picture of a lot of times people who are in cis het partnerships click right in automatically, unintentionally into the stereotypes. They end up playing it out. The benefit, I think, of queer relationships or non-traditional or multi-generational homes, things like that, are that they don't have that automatic of a click in. They oftentimes, I think this is where I get to the studies, they have more intention generally than non-traditional family systems tend to take a more intentional approach, even a more self-reflective approach, and taking that self-inventory of questioning why I'm doing this, how I'm doing this, does it meet our family's needs? Is there a better way that we could be doing this? So in the absence of that automatic slipping into the formula, there is that opportunity to create more intention. And now, like, of course, I'm speaking in broad generalizations, so take that all with a grain of salt. But the summary of what I'm getting at is really it is about intention, taking inventory of yourself, your family's needs, even how much capacity at any given time, what you like to do, what you're good at doing, what you want to challenge yourself to do. I think if we all do that more, we're all better off at home and in our communities.
I completely agree. It's a great intention to set for your family. And like you said, with tasks, like my husband doesn't mind doing the dishes. I don't mind putting away laundry. Like I get to go sit upstairs and have my Bravo TV on while I'm folding clothes and putting it away. And it's kind of peaceful and fun. Whereas he likes to be more with the family and around the family. And I don't know, it's just different. And it's nice to be able to look at your strengths and weaknesses or things you don't mind as much. And there's actually, when we do our chore audit, I got an idea from Married at First Sight, I think. They had written down all of the chores, like even answering the door if somebody comes unannounced. And they took turns picking which ones they wanted. And I was like, that's great, because there are going to be some that you absolutely hate, and you can keep avoiding those and continue picking, which one would I enjoy most out of all of these. It was great. We do that now.
I love that.
We're like, which one? Your turn, my turn.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I'm glad you brought it up. How can we hold people accountable without immediately stepping into the emotional labor of managing their reactions to it?
That's a great question. Ultimately, we can only hold ourselves accountable, and we can communicate clearly. I think that there are a lot of fantastic resources out there, whether it's with a therapist directly or like psychoeducation skills. I mean, DBT is something that I have learned a lot from as I've become an adult, just being able to regulate myself and communicate with intention, thinking about the outcome I'm trying to achieve or accomplish and staying on course. That's always been hard for me. But I'll also shout out Nedra Glover Tawwab. She wrote Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And it's, I think, a really transformative look at how we decide what responsibility we can take for what we want and then plan our path again, like according to what we need, communicating something clearly and then tailoring our behavior. Because you can't make somebody do something they're not going to do. You can't force someone to do something they don't want to do.
And it's not yours to take on their reaction to it as well. And I'm a big fan of therapy, so I'm glad you keep bringing that up. I think it's so important. And we exercise our bodies, and exercising your mental health and your brain and emotions is important too. How do couples repair after a confrontation about unfair labor division, especially if the relationship has long operated on imbalance?
How do couples repair? Trust is a really big piece of the puzzle with domestic equity. And I think a lot of times when you're stuck in the nag paradox, the person who is doing more of the managing and the delegating is put in a position of over functioning and kind of being so reliable that it costs them their autonomy. And the other party needs to step in and show that they can be just as reliable and maybe not get it correct or like not get everything right, but be a part of the solution and take ownership of, again, how to problem solve afterward, take responsibility for their own emotions. And that's the delicate dance of like getting yourself out of that. Is one party has to slowly stop over functioning and the other party has to begin to take on more of the responsibility that might have been taken on by someone else. And that takes consistency. So a good practice is to revisit what happened at a low emotion time. I'm assuming you've probably done this with yours, but like a recurring meeting that is a low emotion time, and sitting down and talking about and saying like, okay, that could have been better. Let's problem solve. How can we trim the fat? How can we be more efficient? How could I have communicated differently? How could I have communicated differently? And each kind of coming to the table with like something that that individual could improve. Not saying like you should have done this, but more, all right, our household needs to function. This is what keeps us alive. I can do this. And then the other person can take their turn. And doing that reliably, like doing that consistently.
Yeah, I think that's why I really appreciate the revisit of our chore audit too, because that's like you said, a low emotional time to be able to revisit those things. And when you're picking those out again, that's when those topics can come up a lot easier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's like housework is so complicated and such a minefield sometimes because it is very human, intimate, like nurturing work. And it can feel very tied to your heart, your emotions, your feelings, your mental wellness. Like it really impacts you. And it's also just very logistical. Like so there's these two aspects, like we need to get this done. Logistically, we have to get this done. And I think, a lot of people who struggle with this and then end up divorced or separated or living in a different household, as someone who is also caring for kids or who is co-parenting with you, they realize that this dynamic doesn't go away. But the emotional reliance on that person does go away so much. And it can actually be a huge relief to no longer be having to maintain, like overfunction for someone emotionally and just to do the logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So, ideally, if you want to work it out, then that would mean you each need to take personal responsibility for naming your emotions and communicating. But sometimes that's not how it goes. So it's not always the end game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like you said, you can't control the other person. And I'm glad you're bringing up overfunctioners and underfunctioners as well, because it's so easy to slip into those roles, even if you're not naturally like an overfunctioner. So I think it's important to be aware of those dynamics if they're present in your home or relationship.
Mm-hmm.
At Bloomera, we believe healing is both truth telling and brave action. So I like to end each episode with a little truth or dare challenge. So
Awesome.
it's time for your truth or dare. First is your truth. What is one truth you want our listener to know about healing, growth, empowerment, equity, whatever it is that you think could be something that helped you, changed you, or you wish more people knew or understood?
I think my entire life changed when I recognized where care was missing. And I think about that in how I treat myself. How am I caring for myself, my body, my mind, all of that? How am I caring for others? And is it reciprocal? Is it considerate of my needs and their needs and us as whole people? How much importance or value or weight am I putting on care? How am I prioritizing care? And then not just in my household, but in my work. How was my time and energy being valued? And what was, again, my priority? Why was I working the way I was working and who was benefiting from it? And when I started paying attention to that, you really can't, like, it became undeniable how dehumanized we are just in society. And then when I started thinking about that more, it clicks into place. Who is the most dehumanized? What work is the most dehumanized? Who is doing the dehumanized work? You can think about domestic workers. You can think about the essential workers. Think about the people who work agriculture, who are literally keeping us fed, healthcare, education, hospice, all of these. You think about the way that we treat disabled people. All of the injustices of the world come down to a lack of care, who it's withheld from, and who is entitled to it or behaves as if they are entitled to it. So once I started paying attention to how care is distributed in society and how it's distributed in my home, it pulled this thread where all justice in my partnership and with my family and in my neighborhood, in my city, in my state, globally, it completely shifted how I showed up in all of those spaces. And it's been for the better.
That's a beautiful focus. I am going to do some reflection on that myself. And now for your dare. What is one small, brave challenge you'd offer someone listening, something they can try this week to move closer to their own healing power or freedom?
I would say, speaking to my point just moments ago, prioritize care in one way, like push something else aside and prioritize showing up in care somehow to yourself, to a loved one, to a neighbor, just that broad. Prioritize care in one way that you might not have before.
Challenge accepted. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I've really appreciated your perspective and your insights and the tools that you have offered me and my listeners. So I'm really grateful that you took the time to be here.
I'm honored. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. So thank you for having me.
Of course. If you loved this episode, share it with your mom friends. And make sure you go check out my episodes on ending the chore wars and finding equity within your home. Those are linked in the episode description for you. I'll see you in the next episode.